Hello and welcome to another episode of North 100, a Canadian Highlander podcast. I'm Serge. Joining me is a slightly different lineup. Today we have Jer and Liam. We have no Alex today. I know, that's okay. It's fine. A reminder that this podcast is brought to you by you with your support at the Patreon at patreon.com/LoadingReadyRun. We literally couldn't do it without you. Thank you so much. Let's dive in to our opening segment, the best card you're not playing. And up to date, we have Liam. Liam, what are you going to inflict on us today?
Inflict? God, yeah.
Harsh.
All right, unfair. I'm sorry.
Well, this card is unfair, so
Okay.
that's actually probably a reasonable
You
choice.
stole Liam's line too? Man.
So the card we're talking about today is Dragonstorm.
I wasn't wrong.
And I maybe mentioned a couple episodes ago that I was, in the last 6 hours had been trying to think about how to brew Dragonstorm. Well, I did it. So yeah, this Dragonstorm card is pretty good as it turns out.
It costs 9?
It does cost 9, but it has Storm, and unlike most Storm cards, you don't need to Storm that much. In fact, you need to Storm for exactly 2. Gitaxian Probe Dragonstorm is lethal. Because you can find...
Doesn't beat interaction.
No, but you can beat interaction with more Storm count.
Yeah.
So you can find Karthus, Tyrant of Jund, or Dragonlord Kolaghan, dealer's choice, and Atarka World Render, the non-Dragonlord green-red dragon.
You're going to have to go through the steps. How do you kill them with this?
It's just lethal. So Karthus is a dragon that gives you control of all dragons and says all your dragons have haste.
Okay.
And it has trample. And then Atarka World Render is a dragon with trample and flying that says whenever a dragon you control attacks, it gets double strike.
The bad one.
Yeah, Atarka World Render. This one. Yeah, this bad mamma jamma.
Whenever a dragon attacks, it gets double strike.
Correct,
So Tarka
yeah.
cracks for 12.
And Karthus, Tyrant of Jund, cracks for 14. So it's 26 with trample. Then it gets even better. If you have more, so just 2 is lethal. With 3 Storm, you can get Dragonlord Dramoka first and lock them out of casting spells. So if they wanted to cast a removal spell, too bad.
Dragonlord Jamoka says your opponents can't cast spells on your turn.
Huh.
It also adds more damage to the clock. I 50'd someone with this deck. Then if they have blockers, you can get Thundermaw Hellkite and just tap down all their flying blockers.
So Dragonstorm was like a legit standard deck for a while.
Correct, with 4x Boggart and Hellkite.
Yeah, Boggart and Hellkite was like the way to go.
Yeah, we play 0 of that one. that one, no good.
Huh.
Yeah.
Not enough dragon clones.
No.
You made Dragonstorm a thing in Highlander.
Correct, yeah. And
how did you do with this deck?
I went 3-1, but I got pretty lucky,
Okay.
to be fair. Jer was my only loss. He was playing lands. It was very fiendish of him to strip away my lands. The basic the basic strat is like you play a bunch of ramp spells so that you can actually cast these dragons on the fair. Like if you just want to pay mana for them.
Like, are you actually storming or are you ramping to 9?
Little column A, little column B, yeah. Like I have like early harvest in my deck to untap basic lands.
Okay.
I have a bunch of basic lands in my deck. Like, I don't know, the max storm count I probably generated in a game was like 8 or 9.
What colors are you? Are you just like base Jund?
No, I'm blue, green, black, red, white. There's 1 plains, 2 forests, 3 swamps.
You're so greedy.
No. You have all the ramp spells.
Your mana's with this?
Yeah. Your mana's always perfect. It's amazing what ramp spells will do for you. I was playing some bad ramp spells. Yeah. But yeah, so Dragonstorm, try it out. I haven't yet tried out the like ritual version of Dragonstorm, where you're like trying to ritual up into 9 and Dragonstorm every time because I was worried about drawing the dragons. Like in this deck, it was great. I also had Dark Depth Thespian Stage in my deck, and I did kill people with that occasionally.
Why?
Because Into the North and Hour of Promise double as ramp spells and ways to find Dark Depth Thespian Stage, and Primeval Titan's just a fine thing to ramp into.
It's not a dragon.
No, that's true. Honorary dragon.
You're so greedy.
It was great.
I love this.
Yeah, it was fun.
All right,
my opponent had a Bone Picker. I hard cast a Thundermaw Hellkite and attacked him with Merit Losh.
Sorry, I have to say this right now. You're gonna have to put a list in. Like 100%. People want this list.
Yeah, all right. I
want this list.
I have that. I have it ready. I can supply.
Wow. I don't even want to move on to today's theme. I just want to talk about Dragonstorm some more. But no. Let's
Another
do
time.
Yeah,
maybe
yeah.
in a coming LoadingReadyRun stream, I can Dragonstorm some
You
people.
blew my mind.
I'll counter Q you with lands.
No, not again.
All right, let's talk about today's theme. The savvy amongst you will see that today's title is the points list. But what do we mean? Well, with today's reduced crew, we want to do a deep dive into the points list. What's pointed? Why is it pointed? And how do we how does the council go about assigning specific points values to specific cards? So to start us off, what is the points list, Jer?
So instead of having a ban, well, in addition to having the vintage ban list, the way we sort of govern the power level of decks is using a point list, which certain powerful cards and powerful cards are put onto the list to stop everyone from just jamming all the powerful cards and helping format diversity.
And how do we determine how many points a card is?
Generally, how good it is at being broken or winning the game or doing whatever it is that card.
And is this data-driven or sort of a democratic process?
It's largely democratic. There's not enough data within our format.
It's not a true democracy, though.
Yeah.
We don't show up into a forum and have everyone vote on
We
individual
used
cards.
to, and we had some dark days back then.
That's what made Jared quit Highlander.
Yeah.
Yep.
So that's fine. So we have a council. They listen to people. They look at the health of the format. They assign points values just to try and keep the format healthy. So today we have broken down the points cards into 5 different categories, and we're not going to talk about every single card. Instead, we want to talk about them sort of how they represent a category. And the categories today are fast mana, combo, tutors, card advantage, and generally powerful. I didn't spell generally right. I spelled it generically powerful, and that's not a real word. So let's start off with sort of an introductory topic. Let's talk about fast mana. And as always, let's get Jer to introduce what is fast mana.
So fast mana is
Mana that is
ups
fast.
your mana count. So it's either you pay an upfront cost and then it provides you more mana on later turns, or it provides you more mana now than you put into it.
I think I saw another way on that too, which is a normal deck, you get 1 land per turn if you're making all your land drops. So turn 1, 1, turn 2, turn 3, 3. Fast mana lets you skip that. Turn 1, 3, turn 2, 4, and now you're ahead. Sure. And so we evaluate fast mana on the following criteria. How much does it cost to get it out? What's the impact? And how long does it stick around? Is it one shot or is it continuous? So let's start off with our first example. We have a 7-point card, which is Black Lotus. Why is Black Lotus 7 points, Jer?
So this card could easily be in a different section. It's also largely a combo card.
Okay.
It's 7 points because of its use in Storm decks. That's the only option. It's not 7 points because it powers out Garruk Wildspeaker.
Although that also looked patently unfair.
Yeah, I was on the other end of Fair Lotus. And it didn't
Not
feel
bad.
That's up on
would
YouTube now, by the way, in case you're looking for
It
it.
would definitely
Loading
be
Ready
on the
Live.
list, but not at 7.
Yeah.
Pretty much if Yawgmoth's Will wasn't a card.
Interesting.
Yeah, probably right.
And then from 7, we drop all the way down to 3 points. And so we have Sol Ring and Moxen at 3. You want to talk about that a little bit, Liam?
Yeah, for sure. So these are pretty consciously put at 3 for a couple of reasons. One, they're super powerful, but the Moxen in particular are some of the only pointed cards that go into aggro decks. And so the goal with making them 3 is we want to allow aggro decks to play 3 of them if they want to. The triple Mox aggro spread is very common.
The Triple Mox Stoneforge.
Yeah, like triple Mox Stoneforge or like double Mox Strip Mine, GT.
Yep.
But we're very conscious of how those more fair decks need to sort of like use their points. And we know we don't want them to be able to play 4 Moxen, and we feel like playing 2 Moxen isn't enough. So that's actually why the Moxen largely fall at 3. Sol Ring's a recent change, and this one was actually championed by Jer, so it might be better for him to talk about why Sol Ring changed from 4 to 3, like about 6 months ago, 8 months ago?
I think it was, 8-ish months ago.
A while ago.
And so Sol Ring wasn't seeing much play, and the Sol Ring decks weren't doing super well. And so what I mean by a Sol Ring deck is like a slower, predominantly 2-color deck that plays 4 mana and higher cards. The format's gotten a lot faster, and people started playing more colors just to have more efficient answers and threats. And so people just hadn't been playing Sol Ring because Sol Ring doesn't provide you colors, and it doesn't help cast super efficient cards.
Yeah, the only decks that really want Sol Ring are either like mid-range or control. It's very rare for an aggro deck to want Sol Ring early because you can't play out those earlier threats, or it's hard to play out 2 threats off a Sol Ring.
And a lot of the time too, it being 3 or it being 4, even if you were an aggro deck and you wanted it, it wasn't really worth playing double Mox Sol Ring when you could just play 3 Moxen and get another point.
Exactly.
One other thing I just wanted to say about the Moxen is the other reason they're 3 and not higher is that despite being very good, they're sort of a card that is very high rolly. So in your opening hand, Moxen are amazing.
Yeah.
But if you draw Mox later in the game, it can often be
The
just
roll-off
like
value.
drawing a land.
Yeah.
Which is why we don't want people to have a ton of them in their deck, but we're okay with them having some because it's just a one-shot of mana and it scales down the later the game goes.
All right, now I got a curveball for you guys. I'm going to name 3 cards. The first one is Mana Crypt. So Mana Crypt casts for 0. Has the ability to flip a coin, take 3 damage, and it adds 2 to your mana pool. Next up, we have Mana Vault, which is a 1-mana artifact. Doesn't untap. You can pay 4 to untap it, but add 3 to your mana pool.
And at the beginning of your upkeep, it pings you for 1 if it's tapped.
Yep. And then finally, we have Grim Monolith, which is 2 to cast, tap to add 3, doesn't untap, and is 4 to untap. So we have 3 cards that are very, very, very similar. Except Mana Vault is 2 points. Sorry, Mana Crypt is 2 points. Mana Vault is 1 point, and Grim Monolith is 0. What is the difference between these 3 cards that gave them the different point values?
Yeah. So to start off, the reason why Mana Crypt is the highest, it's recurable mana. It costs 0, so it's very cheap. You can get it right away, and it makes 2 mana, which is a big deal. The drawback is it does 3 damage to you, but a lot of the decks that are playing this card don't care. But
So on average, it deals 1.5 damage to you
turn,
per turn.
yeah, exactly.
So three damage every 2 of your turns.
or if you're me, 3 damage every turn from 20 to -1.
Yeah.
I want to jump in really quick. There was a great story I remember of like OG Vintage Landers Day where somebody had the turn 1 Mana Crypt into
Time Vault?
Time Vault Voltaic Key. And then went lost a coin flip 7 turns in a row and died. Like they took infinite turns and died through own Mana Crypt immediately.
That's
It was
just
incredible.
justice.
Yeah. Sorry, the story would have been told better if I
No.
actually could name the cards there. But Mana Crypt, the downside is real. Just like,
Yeah.
are you never lucky or always lucky?
And so that's the reason Soul Ring is more points than Mana Crypt. It's actually one of the questions we get probably the most frequently asked about the points list is because lots of people were coming from 40 life formats where you don't get as much pressure put on you.
Yeah, where Mana Crypt is just like amazing.
And it's just basically a free roll. But in this format, the damage you take is super relevant. Like getting hit once or twice is like definitely a full turn for the aggro deck.
Yeah, the red deck's like, what, free bolts? Yeah, don't mind if I do.
Yeah. And so,
why
the
is
cost is real.
Why is Mana Vault only 1?
It's actually 1 point largely because of the combo decks. Like fair Mana Vault isn't the problem. It's the people who are looking to use Mana Vault as colorless Dark Ritual, which is basically what this card is in most of the decks it sees play in. Like you'll see this in Storm sometimes they'll play this card. You'll see this card in the Paradox Academy list where it gets to be untapped for free
yeah.
a lot of the time. It's pretty gross in that deck. And since it costs 1, and as we say it is kind of just a Dark Ritual, a lot of the time it's worthy of 1 point. This one's one of the ones where it's pretty important to talk about the specific decks that make it be 1 point. Like Jared did a good job with Lotus. We're talking about Storm. Mana Vault's similar. It's like Storm makes this card need to be 1 point. Academy decks make this card probably need to be 1 point. Can you think of any other ones that sort of like force this to be 1 point? Combo Ruin's a lot of fun, I'll be honest.
I mean, I want to roll this in all my prison decks,
Yeah.
and it's tough justifying it as one of the points, but it goes in. Like a turn 2 Worm Coil or a turn 2 Planeswalker, like a 6 mana Chandra, is backbreaking, and it's enabled off of cards like Mana Vault.
Yep.
Yeah.
All right.
And then lastly,
Grim Monolith. Yeah, why is Grim Monolith 0?
Instead of being Dark Ritual, this one's Pyretic Ritual, much worse. And it's so it costs 2, so you don't get to play it on turn 1 nearly as often. So it doesn't enable as much unfair stuff as Mana Vault.
Yeah.
And then secondly, the cost to untap it is higher. I guess it's the same, but just like you're not going to untap it very often, realistically.
It's largely just the casting cost. People should be able to interact on turn 2. Like you have a chance to interact with this card, and that's part of what goes into pointing a card is partly how interactable are they.
Yeah.
And I think that's the big difference between Grim Monolith and Mana Vault. Like
I think there's just such a great sliding scale there between Sol Ring, Mana Crypt, Mana Vault, and Grim Monolith, so you can see how it goes there.
Yep.
Now let's talk about something really important: the difference between 1 point and 0 in fast mana. So I want to talk about Tolarian Academy, the heart of the Academy deck. So legendary land, tap to add blue for each artifact you control, versus a card like Serra Sanctum, the white version, legend, tap to add white for each enchantment.
Yeah.
Why is Academy 1 and Serra Sanctum is 0? Jer.
So that's just its usability.
Are you saying I can't roll people with Enchantress?
No.
No,
You definitely can, but you can roll people with exactly Enchantress, as opposed to a lot of things with Academy.
Like, people try to play Tolarian Academy in Storm. People play Tolarian Academy in Artifact aggro decks.
Yeah.
And then there's, of course, the decks just, like, revolving around the card. They like, play green exactly for land tutors to get Tolarian Academy. Like...
Sometimes white for like
Wargate.
just to find
Yeah,
Academy.
the old double splash.
Yeah.
I've definitely played 4-color Academy.
Yeah.
Where black is just for Tezzeret and green and white are just for Academy.
and I think this dichotomy is pretty interesting. There's also just more playable artifacts that go into a more synergistic strategy. Like I said, I wasn't trying to make fun of Enchantress.
I know.
It is a real deck, like mostly. Like you can play it. It's
And
definitely
have a good time.
It's definitely playable, but it's sort of like in the Enchantress deck. There's sort of like, I would guess, I've never played it, so I'm speaking from a position of ignorance here, but there's probably like 25, 30 cards that go into every Enchantress deck that are just auto-includes, and then there's like a little tuning you can do. You can like...
How do you win?
How do you,
That's
how
a
do you
big
win?
thing. There's
You can Oath of Druids into your Eternal Witnesses.
How many colors you're playing.
Yeah, Enchantress is always the same engine and then a different win package.
Whereas Tolarian Academy fits into more things.
Totally.
And also, there's more abusive artifacts than there are enchantments. One thing we weren't going to talk about, but I've decided is actually worth talking about, is Gaia's Cradle.
Okay.
And this is one that's closer to being 1 point than 0 than Sanctum. Like, Sanctum's
like
never...
yeah.
Sanctum's never going to be a point, but...
hey, who knows? I can cross my fingers.
Right, maybe you could break it. If you just, like, win
No, no,
6
no, no,
events with
no,
Enchantress.
I
The enchantment set.
That's the thing. If there's
yeah.
an enchantment set or another good, cheap Enchantress set comes out,
Yeah.
then maybe it gets good.
Yeah, that's true.
All right, Cradle.
So I don't know if any of you are familiar with the Simpsons reference where it's sort of like old man yells at sky, but like that's definitely me with Gaia's Cradle. So I just want to put my bias out there for everyone to know. I hate this card. I want it to be 1 point. Whenever I've been on the council, I've wanted that. Very few people share this opinion. So Jared, why is this card not worth a point? Because I'm not going to do a good job of explaining it.
This is largely just the difference in interactability, which is what I was talking about earlier. It's that you should be able to interact with creatures easier than you should be able to interact with artifacts. Like, Wrath of God is a very playable Magic card in the format. Shatterstorm is not.
Yeah, you also got Pyroclasm at 2. So it's interesting. Like, and there you see that very, very, very blurry line between 0 and 1.
And it can be blurry. One other thing we're talking about is the color of mana they produce. Blue is the best, green is the second best, and white is like easily the worst of these three in terms of like colors that want a bunch of mana.
So you admit that green is the second best color?
No.
Okay.
Just in terms of making a lot of mana.
All right, let's move on.
Just had to check.
Yeah. That hasn't even come out yet.
No.
Quit spoiling the content.
The Jer and Liam argue about stuff is another bit. No, I'm just teasing. All right, guys, let's move on to combo cards. So the next category of pointed list cards we want to talk about today are cards that are pointed because of how well they do in combo. Jer, for a quick definition of what is a combo?
It's a combination, or sometimes not even combination. Sometimes it's just a card that wins you the game.
Kind of out of nowhere.
Usually on the spot.
Worth noting, synergy does not equal combo. These are things that either end the game or put you in a position where you have to do one or two other things that end the game.
Yes.
So here is how we have defined and how we evaluate combo cards. How fast do you die? Seriously, like, is it turn 2? Is it immediately? Does it take some setup? How many steps? How easy is it to find a combo piece? The combo piece. How easily can it be disrupted? So how much room have you given your opponent to interact with it? Or are they just dead? And finally, how much setup is required? Do you need to have 3 other pieces in play for your combo piece, or do you just win out of everywhere?
And how much mana does it cost?
And also deck building requirements is another pretty big one. Is like some combos require you to play a bunch of cards you never want to draw ever.
We wouldn't know anything about that.
So the most powerful combo cards we have on the list, the most highly pointed cards we have on the list are Flash, which is a 2-mana instant spell.
Yep.
And Time Vault, which is a 2-mana artifact spell.
Correct.
Both of these...
Both cost 2 mana. Interesting.
So I imagine a lot of people are familiar with Time Vault. Let's talk about Flash really quickly. So Flash is a 2-mana instant. You may put a creature card from your hand onto the battlefield. If you do, sacrifice it unless you pay 2. So why are these cards 7 points?
Well, Flash is 7, Time Vault 6.
Pardon me. Why are these cards
expensive,
a lot of points?
Yeah.
Like these are our most expensive combo cards.
So Flash is 7 points because of the way it interacts with Protean Hulk.
Okay.
And that's the only reason you can flash in Protean Hulk and win on turn 2 if you have both in your hand and 2 lands. So it's not very
or
hard.
Lotus Petal. Just 2 mana.
Yeah.
Yeah, true.
Gemstone Cavern, Simian Spirit Guide. There's a lot
That's
of
a turn
options.
one kill.
It's not very hard to set up. It's really hard to interact because you can do it at instant speed. Playing a blue deck versus a flash deck is a literal nightmare because normally blue decks are good against combo decks because they interact at instant speed. If you go through your opponent's turn and they don't kill you, like, sweet, cast some draw spells, cast card selection, cast
Sure.
a flash creature. But if you do that against the flash deck, they're just going to combo you.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
I think I
Steacy.
told this story on the show, right, where Alistair cast a Vendilion Click on my turn 2 end step, and I killed him in response.
And now, why is Time Vault so good?
Yeah, so similar reasons. This one recently came down, actually. It was 7, now 6.
Okay.
So 2 is an easy number to find, and also artifacts are easy to find. So A, it's a pretty easy combo to find. B, it actually combos with more stuff than you would think. So Voltaic Key is the really obvious one, but there are other subtle ones like Captain of the Mists and Mirage
Basically,
Mirror.
every piece of the Kiki Jiki combo.
Yeah, all the, if you want to play like the Pestermites and Deceiver Exarchs, those all give you an extra turn at least. They turn Vault
They
into a
don't,
time
they don't
lock.
quite combo,
But they're good enough. They're really still very good.
There's also like a bunch of other reasonable cards you can play because they combo with Time Vault. Like, it's the only place Raul Zarek sees play in the format.
Yeah.
Because he is like a somewhat reasonable card to draw and combos with Time Vault.
Yeah. So that's the big thing. It's easy to find. The printing of War of Invention was really was another buff to this deck. So it's easy to find. It's a little easier to interact with than Flash, which is why I think a lot of us felt like it should be a point lower than Flash because it's not quite as good. It's an artifact. People can kill artifacts. And also, as you said at the start of the show, you're not guaranteed to win. You might have your mana crypt in play and just not kill them.
Yeah, but I think what you touched on is the big one, is that, like, it's not like you tap out, they put Time Vault in play, and you instantly die. They do need something else.
Yeah.
And,
You have to find the last piece.
like, they're printing better and better artifact destruction spells. Like, the printing of a Braid is, like,
Oh,
a
man.
huge
Braid is so
huge
good.
detriment to this deck, because, like, virtually every red deck is at least playing a Braid.
So let's move down. Let's move down quite a few rungs on the combo list, and let's talk about Natural Order versus Tinker. Both of these cards are sorceries that require you to sacrifice something and then put an equivalent type into play. So Natural Order is a 4-mana sorcery, 2 green, sacrifice a creature, find a green creature. And Tinker is a 3-mana spell for 2 and a blue, sacrifice an artifact, put any artifact into play. Why are these so much lower than Flash Time Vault?
And the green one's more expensive than the blue one, eh? No. So the reason why these are a little less expensive, they're 5 and 4 versus 6 and 7, is one, they don't necessarily win the game. Natural Order usually wins the game. Tinker actually almost never wins the game these days. It can put you in a very good position, but it's not as though your opponent just dies most of the time. Occasionally, when you're
It
tinkering
requires
for
a lot of setup to just win on the spot.
So they're not quite as good as just strictly winning the game. And then they also require a lot of investment. Like if you get your Tinker or Natural or Counterspelled, it's pretty bad.
Yep.
The worst is getting them remanded.
Yeah,
It's
that
just
feels pretty awful.
such a
Sack
savage
again, and you're like,
thing.
I know you have another counterspell in hand too. You're just
Yeah, you like see them think for a minute, and then they're like, actually, remand.
actually.
And you're just like, I'm not winning this game.
So those are reasons why they're lower. Reasons why they're still this high is Natural Order in particular fits into the green decks as a top-end finisher. It finds Craterhoof Behemoth. That's really abusive. You usually die. Not always, but often. It also finds Primeval Titan, which is a nice way to kill people with basically nothing else.
Yeah, it's like a flowchart. It's like, does Craterhoof kill them? If yes, get Craterhoof. If no, get Primeval Titan. Kill them 2 turns later.
Yeah,
Primeval
and
Titan
if
can-
neither of those things are good, you still get something else good. Get Hornet Queen.
Or what's that stupid...
Rurikthar?
Rurikthar
Yeah,
is
yeah.
another classic one. You're like, oh, I'm against combo and I can't
Dragon
quite
Lord
kill them.
Atarka is a newer one that's natural orderable.
All right. Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, the one other thing I was going to say, Tinker's one lower because the things you find are on average worse. So some of the stronger things you find with Tinker are like Blightsteel Colossus, that can end the game very quickly. But then after that, the list goes down. Like Sphinx of the Steel Wind is a really potent card against mono red, but not great in all matchups.
Inkwell Leviathan.
Leviathan, Staff of Nin and Paradox Engine are like maybe the next two
Like the
ones
fact
down.
that Staff of Nin is in like
Yeah, the top
five
five.
Tinker targets in the format just
Yeah.
speaks to sometimes the
Yeah.
extent you have to go to play Tinker.
Yeah.
So that's why it's Poquito lower.
I miss Tinker into Staff of Nin being
Although I
like
think
OP.
the Immortal Sun maybe takes Staff of Nin's
Does it now?
spot. I
pretty
think it's possible.
Interesting.
It's pretty good.
All right, so I want to talk about sort of the bottom tier of combo cards because it's interesting because not every combo card makes it in here.
In fact, not very many.
Yeah, so I want to talk about like Hermit Druid. Hermit Druid is a 2-mana green creature for a 1/1. Pay a green, reveal top cards off at the top of your library until you find a basic land. So basically, you play no basic lands and put your whole graveyard into play. Versus something like Splinter Twin. So why is Hermit Druid pointed and Splinter Twin isn't? Because Splinter Twin, I mean, banned in Modern. This card's nuts. Hermit Druid, no one's ever heard of Hermit Druid. Like that's a pretty vague card.
Yeah, and then the other 0-point combo we want to talk about was Painter Grindstone as well.
So interestingly, Painter Grindstone used to be pointed way back in the day.
Before my time.
A long time ago.
Yeah, we used to point Painter Servant, but not Grindstone.
Yeah,
Worth noting, Hermit Druid was like 4 points a year ago.
5 points.
Not a year ago, it was 4 a year ago.
Sure.
Yeah.
But when we started on this, so it's 1 now for context, but when Jared and I were on the council together, it was 4, and now it's just recently gone down to 1. It's gone down literally every council vote since last year.
Not quite everyone,
But close to.
So
pretty-
let's talk
pretty
about some
close.
stuff here. Why are some cards pointed in combo and others aren't? When you could say at the end of the day they end games.
Sure.
So I think a large part of the reason I've been like probably played the most Hermit Druid in the format, and a large part of the reason it's got a lot worse, which is reflective of its decline in points, is that just the shift of the metagame that I was talking about earlier. People are playing much more efficient interaction, and on average, you're facing efficient interaction more often. And it turns out cheap removal spells are good at killing 1/1s.
And it's worth noting, this card has to sit and play for a turn. So unlike Time Vault, where you can play Voltaic Heal on the same turn, win the game, unless you've got something goofy in your deck like Anger, I don't know who would do that. You have to play the Hermit Druid, it has to live, then you have to activate it, or like you have to entomb the Hermit Druid and then like shallow grave it.
Post-mortem lunge.
Yeah, post-mortem lunge
And
it.
so as what Liam's basically alluding to is that it either needs to sit and play, or you need to go through a pretty ridiculous amount of hoops to set it up.
So why is it pointed and the other ones aren't?
Yeah,
And
so
he's talking about how bad it is for like.
So at the end of the day, it's still a creature that costs 2. 2, the easiest number to find in Highlander.
Okay.
And creature, there's a lot of free tutors for 2, or for creatures. So
Especially green creature.
yeah, so it's easy to find, and we're talking about how you have to jump through a bunch of hoops, but it's actually easier to recur than a lot of combo pieces, and you can build your deck to recur it pretty efficiently. So that's why it's 1. Comparatively, Splinter Twin, this is a 7-mana combo. You have to play a creature first, then you have to play the Splinter Twin, and so it's 7 mana. That's
You
a
have
lot.
to not kill your creature in response.
And yeah, removal spell interacts with it, which is a big deal.
And
There's a
you
lot
have-
of removal
I
spells.
think the big part is just like the 4-mana sorcery.
Yeah.
It's like the 3-mana creature you can play at instant speed. It's not like the hardest to get that into play and untap with it, but just like the commitment of like playing this 4-mana aura. And if you win the game, we're just pretty okay if you're winning the game at sorcery speed with 4 mana.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah,
So let's
you earned it.
Let's wrap up a little bow on combo really quick. So we talked about a 7-point card. Now we've talked about a 1-point card. So again, how fast do you die? How easily can you find the pieces? How cheap are the pieces? What sort of room does it give you for interaction and disruption from your opponent? And what's the setup? Like how many pieces, how many hoops do you have to go through? I think gives a pretty good example of why we point cards, why the council points cards the way they do, and where those values sort of line up on things.
Yep.
Let's move on to tutors. The next category we have right here. Jared, what's a tutor?
A card that finds a card and either puts it in your hand or on top of your deck or in some future attainable manner.
Well, sometimes, sometimes
from the
directly into
top.
play or something cool like that.
Yeah, exactly.
And then again, you might find some blur in the lines here, like Tinker could be both a combo card and a tutor, but it is what it is.
Yeah.
So how we've evaluated a tutor is, what does it find? Like, what is this tutor actually for? That's really relevant to how much it's pointed. And how versatile is it? Does it only find one card? Does it find any card? Secondly, how much does it cost? And then finally, is it card advantage? So where does it actually put the cards you find? Into play or on top of your library? Because technically, if it goes on top of your library, you've lost a card. So let's talk about some examples here. And this is probably one of my favorite examples. We have Demonic Tutor, which is a 2-mana sorcery. Find any card, don't show it, put it in your hand.
Quattro points.
4 points. Next up, we have Vampiric Tutor, which is a 1-mana black, or 1 black mana instant. Did I pronounce that right? It's
Yeah,
a
you're
single
good.
mana. Yeah. Pay 2 life, any card on top of your deck.
Trace points.
3 points. And then finally we have Imperial Seal for a single black mana. For a sorcery, lose life, put a card on top of your deck.
That one's dose points.
2. So we have 4, 3, 2 for a very, very, very similar effect.
No, is Seal 1 yet?
No, Seals 2.
Yeah. So 4, 3, 2.
It was a saga to get it to 2. Like, I did my job.
So let's talk about this. Let's talk about this. Why is there a point difference between all these effects that are so close? In particular, the difference between Vampiric Tutor and Imperial Seal, instant and sorcery. Like, how do we justify that 1 point increment between these 3 cards?
So let's start by talking about Demonic Tutor because I think this one's the easiest to delineate from the other 2.
Okay.
This card is not card disadvantageous. Puts it straight into your hand.
Yep.
It costs 2 and it finds anything.
Yeah. Stuck on lands, get a land.
In fact, that's the most commonly tutored for card with Demonic Tutor. It's Underground Sea.
That is I say it often, my most commonly tutored 4 card.
So
Interesting.
Demonic Tutor is very good because it can be both Sylvan Scrying and Demonic Tutor. When we get to, as you say, Vampiric Tutor and Imperial Seal, it gets a lot more complicated. So they do similar things, but the instant speed is the really important thing here. And Jared, maybe you want to elucidate on this a little bit more.
Yeah,
good
so
news.
just the versatility of having an instant versus a sorcery at your disposal is huge. Being able to cast it on your opponent's end step, which is the most common usage, just enables you to sort of look like you're up to nothing, and then all of a sudden, like,
Surprise.
put the card you need on top of your deck. Oops, I win. Whereas, like, same example with Imperial Seal, you're just like, I'm just gonna find any old card, put it on top of my deck, go, hope nothing bad happens.
Yeah,
you know?
you can even cast Vamp in your upkeep too. Like you could be
That's-
tapped out, and then
that's
all
also
of a
what I
sudden-
was getting at. And then there's things you can do with Vampiric Tutor that Imperial Seal just doesn't do. Say you need to cast like Voltaic Key on your turn 1, but you don't have enough mana to.
Yeah.
And you have enough mana to go off the next turn. Say you have like a Dark Ritual or something to ritual out the
Yeah.
the Time Vault and untap it.
Yeah.
So you can vamp in your upkeep for Time Vault, draw it, then Dark Ritual,
Then
combo.
you go.
Surprise game.
Whereas Imperial Seal just doesn't enable that line of play at all.
It's also the top of your deck is more vulnerable than you realize. Like Ben got his Imperial Seal portented a couple weeks ago.
So Portent is probably your best card you're not playing as well.
Yeah, it's basically slow ponder.
You think of it as bad ponder, but the ability of this card to actually disrupt your opponent's stack is like
Sometimes relevant.
Yeah.
very relevant. You're playing against goblins, you're playing against these sorcery speed top of your
Stack
deck
recruiter.
effects. Oh, I love it.
Yeah, so portent, by the way, is just target player ponders, and then but it's you. So you look at the top 3
You
cards of
ponder target player.
Yeah, so you look
Yeah.
at the top 3 cards of someone's deck, then you can decide to shuffle them or not, and then you draw a card on the next upkeep. So yeah, he had just Imperial Sealed, put I think World Gorger Dragon on top of his deck, and then it wasn't there anymore. And he had
Feels
spent
bad.
2 life and a card for this wonderful effect.
All right, so we've established 4-3-2 when it comes to tutors. Let's talk about, again, that fine line between a 1-point card and a 0-point card.
Yep.
So 1-point card, we have Worldly Tutor. So it's green, it's instant, you can get any creature, reveal it, and put it on top of your deck. Or Eladrami's Call. Green and a white for an instant, Eladrami's Call?
Eladamri.
Damn it, Eladrami's Call. Find any creature, reveal it, and put it into your hand. So we just talked about your hand being better on top of your library, but Worldly Tutor is 1 point. E-Call
Nice.
is
Good
0.
save.
Thank you. Now let's talk about that.
Yeah, this is really contentious. So these cards were brought up at the same time about we were going to point a creature tutor, and it was going to be one of these 2 cards. So the reason why Worldly Tutor ultimately ended up being points and Eladamri's Call has remained 0 is a couple of things. It costs 1 more mana. It costs 2 colors of mana, so it's not as splashable. And then lastly, Worldly Tutor is better in more decks. So Worldly Tutor is like a card that Storm was free rolling to go get Oriok Salvagers. Worldly Tutor is obviously very good in the green creature decks, but it was also like being played in like Flash Hulk. You could play it in a lot of things. I was playing it in the bad Splinter Twin decks to go get Kiki Jiki. I can't do that anymore. Whereas Eladamri's Call was not being used for fair purposes, but at least you had to gut up and put white in your deck as well. So
and the thing is, Eladamri's Call is more likely to be played as a fair card.
Yes.
Because the fair decks usually aren't willing to go down on card advantage for for the sake of a tutor because they're not winning the game with the tutor. They're just getting like whatever silver bullet card they need at the time.
Like Silverblade Paladin, you're like, haha, 5 mana, kill you. And it's like, I'm actually okay with dying to double strike for 5 mana.
Yeah,
exactly.
Exactly. And so that was also part of the discussion is like, well, the fair decks are willing to play Eladamri's Call, but they're not willing to play Worldly Tutor. So we're looking to not damage the fair decks when we don't need to.
Yep.
All right. I think that gives a pretty good recap of like the tutors, what goes into evaluating a tutor and the criteria and stuff like that.
Yep.
Let's move on to card advantage. Now, card advantage is something we've talked about a lot on the show. We talked about it in our mid-range episode and our control episode. Basically, every time we talk about an archetype, we talk about how we generate card advantage. But as a refresher, Jer, what is card advantage?
Something that gives you more cards than you put into it, or equivalent value of,
Or takes cards away from your opponent.
sure.
Yeah, I think that's totally fine. And it's worth mentioning that there aren't a lot of card advantage cards pointed.
No.
Which is neat, and this is different from cards that are just good. We have that.
That's coming later.
Yeah. So how do we evaluate this? Does it generate, like, how much card advantage does it generate? Secondly, how expensive is it? And then finally, how splashable is it? So what's the advantage? What deck does it go into? And what does it cost you to generate that advantage? So here's an example, probably the biggest example: Ancestral Recall. So this is the card we're going to hold it all an example to. 1 blue mana, target player draws 3 cards.
Yeah, why? So
Like, I think enough said on this one.
Yeah.
It's an instant.
Yeah.
It's a single colored mana. It's insanely splashable.
It's blue. You can pitch it to force a spell.
Like 3, you get 3 for 1. I don't know.
6 points.
7.
7 points now.
7 points.
Ofa.
Continually going up. It was 5 a year ago.
All right.
But yeah, so this is the best card advantage card. Not close. It's not the first recall that kills you. It's the second, but the first recall finds the second.
So let's talk about a similar card, in so much that it says draw 3 cards, which is Treasure Cruise.
Yeah.
So Treasure Cruise, 8 mana, but it has Delve. Draw 3 cards. Now Cruise is only 1.
Yeah, and this is really interesting. Jared and I were on the council that pointed Treasure Cruise. We both fought fairly tooth and nail.
It took us forever.
Yeah, it was to get this one on the points list, and so here's the reason why it's here. If this card was 6 blue, I'm not sure it would be, but it got to the point where if you had blue touching your deck, it was worth playing Treasure Cruise. So like, I was playing Bant aggro, and I was just jamming Treasure Cruise in it, even though it was like pretty off theme, because sometimes you just draw the Treasure Cruise with 7 cards in your graveyard, and you just get them.
I just get Sorcery Speed
Just
Ancestral.
like, free rolled recall in my Bant aggro deck.
Yeah. So it was just too good to be free, and that's an important distinction to make, and we haven't talked about it that much yet, but it is a pretty key one. When we're looking at the difference between 0 and 1, a lot of the times the question you have to ask yourself is this too good to have in every deck? And that's what we ultimately decided with Treasure Cruise was this card's not insanely abusive at 1. Like it's a fine 1. It's a really solid 1, but it's not fair at 0. You don't want every deck playing this.
Exactly.
So
and the difference between 0 points and 1 point is by far the biggest gap anywhere on the points list.
Yep.
Well, let's talk about 2 other 1-point cards just to talk about that. These are pretty solidly 1-point cards. One is Dig Through Time, which again, standard players will be very familiar with. 8 mana, 6 blue, Delve. Look at 7 cards, keep 2. And then finally we have Library of Alexandria.
There's actually a large uprising of people who want to unpoint Library.
Yeah, no, fair. So Library is a land. Tap to add a mana, or if you have 7 cards in hand, you can tap it to draw a card. So these are all other 1-point cards here, sort of showing you where that line is. Now we've got the fuzzy line. The fuzzy line I want to talk about are cards like Mind Twist, which is X and black, target players discards X cards at random. Recurring Nightmare, which is a card that can generate a lot of card advantage the longer it goes. And then finally, Jace the Mind Sculptor. Now, if you didn't know the points list and I told you these 3 cards, how many of these would you think are 1 point? And how many of these would you think are 0 point? Because the answer are Mind Twist is 1 point, Recurring Nightmare is 0 points, and Jace the Mind Sculptor is 0 points. But all of these cards throughout the past couple years have gone back and forth between being 1 and 0 point cards.
Yeah, like more recently, I think Nightmare and Jace have like stayed off the lists for the last like 3. Mind Twist was a super contentious one for sure.
It's been a roller coaster for that card.
So when we're talking about the difference between 1 and 0, we want to get back to this again. This question of is this fair to have in every deck? And with Jace the Mind Sculptor, it has a double blue mana cost, and that's one of the reasons why we think it's fair at 0.
It's also 4 mana.
Yeah, it costs 4 mana, not super splashable. You got to be committed to being blue. And while this is definitely on the fringes, we're okay with blue having access to card advantage. That makes sense.
Yeah.
If you want to put this
That's what
many
it
blue,
does.
yeah, exactly. It's the identity of the color, and we don't believe in pointing cards in a way that's going to fundamentally change the identity of a color. That's not the goal. This is an eternal format. Blue's going to be good. Too bad, so sad. Recurring Nightmare is very powerful when it's set up, but there's setup required. And this is another one where, just on pure power level, you could definitely argue this is generating way too much value. You know, my opponent's like flickering their Thragtusk and something else over and over again, and I can never win. But they had to get all those cards in place somehow. And then lastly, Mind Twist is really contentious. Some of us might not think it's supposed to be 1 point, but the reason it is 1 point is because if it's 0, it goes into way more decks, and it tends to create these sort of like miserable feeling games where you get twisted on turn 3 or 4 for like 3
Your
or 4.
entire hand.
Yeah, and you or even not your entire hand, maybe half your hand, but you lose the important half of your hand and you just die. And so that effect means that the games end up not being very interesting, and so we decided that that's worth 1 point.
So we've got one last card in the card advantage area, and this one's a neat one. I want to talk about Balance. So Balance is a weird old card, 2 mana sorcery, and now bear with me as I describe this. Each player chooses a number of lands they control equal to the number of lands controlled by the player with the least amount. Then sacrifice the rest. Then do the same thing for the cards in your hand and creatures. Why is this a card advantage card?
Because when you play it, you have fewer lands than your opponent,
Yeah.
fewer cards in hand than your opponent, and no creatures.
Yeah. And then what happens to their board?
They
They make with the scooping it up and they put it in their graveyard.
Yeah. So this is a really interesting card, and one that also has sort of. This one's pretty solidly 1 point now. I don't think this is going back
It
to
was my
0
first
anytime
contribution
soon.
to the Highlander format, was campaigning for Balance to 1.
Yeah.
Yep. When I arrived, Academy was too good, and I said, here's how we fix Academy. We point Balance.
All right. Now let's go to the fun section.
Yeah.
This is the section of catch-all cards. This is the basically game-warping, powerful cards. And our definition for here is they don't clearly fit into any of the other categories. They're not fast mana or card advantage. They're just good. Like, you play this card and the game revolves around it.
Yep.
Secondly, they don't offer a lot of counterplay. They're cards that if it resolves, it's just going to change the game. Fundamentally, the game has now shifted because this is in play. Well, that's kind of redundant. I was going to say these are cards that warp the game, and that's what I said. All right, so let's talk about our first example, and we want to talk about how these are pointed. Again, for all the examples, what is a very heavily pointed card, and how much do we evaluate this effect and why? So let's start with the big one. Let's talk about Time Walk, which is 6 points. This is a 2-mana sorcery that just reads, take another turn. Why is this 6 points?
So one of the things when we're talking about these kinds of cards, I think is worth talking about is how, like, they warp the game, but also how long do you have to answer them before the game just ends? So one of the reasons Time Walk is 6 is because often the answer is 0. You just die, right? So Time Walk doesn't clearly fit into any of the other categories. It's kind of a combo card. You definitely can combo with it with like Seasons Past and Mystical Tutor or Panoptic Mirror. Like, it can be a combo card, but it also can just be a card that an aggro deck plays and just like attacks you, puts you to 6, you expect to get to untap and play your Wrath, and then they Time Walk you and you die. So this card's obviously very powerful. I don't think we need to sort of like sugarcoat it, but the reason it's as expensive as it is actually somewhat related to Ancestral Recall. And Jared, maybe you want to talk about this sort of discussion that we have in the council oftentimes about Recall and Time Walk, because it's hard to talk about one without talking about the other.
These cards are just intrinsically linked together just because they're both blue and they both cost a lot of points. And it turns out that, at least with blue mid-range decks, if you put either Time Walk or Ancestral in them, in that sort of that void of big blue pointed spell, they work for the most part. They still make the deck very good.
You maybe change the composition of your deck slightly, but it's very similar.
Exactly. So it turns out that if they're too varied in points, the blue mid-range decks just like slant to play whichever one is less. And Ancestral Recall is just a little bit better than Time Walk most of the time. It's much more consistently consistent. Like Time Walk has one of the highest ceilings of any card ever printed in Magic, but the floor is also pretty low.
I love Time Walk just as play another land.
Yeah.
Like the turn 2 Time Walk, pass, basic land, pass. And you're like,
Yeah,
oh.
like Time Walk is sometimes like explore untap 2 basic lands.
Yeah, and that's not very good.
But it's also oftentimes the game ends. So yeah,
Exactly.
high ceiling, but that's why it's 6. It's definitely, there's arguments for making it 5, but if it's 5, then probably very few people play Recall and they play Time Walk instead.
I think so.
All right, let's move on to our next card, Umezawa's Jite. This is a 2-mana legendary artifact. When equipped creature deals combat damage, and this is combat damage, so to a player or to a creature, put 2 counters on it, and the counters can either +2/+2 the creature, -1/-1 another target creature, or gain 2 life. This card is great. Jared, start us off. Why is Jite 2?
Just because anytime your opponent is trying to do anything involving creatures or trying to not die, it makes it very difficult for them to play creatures or not die.
All right, so this is neat. This is a 4-point difference. Like we don't have a lot of points we don't have any points in this category between Time Walk and Jite, so that's a big drop.
Yeah.
Which is kind of neat.
Well, and so Jite warps the game. Like, as Jared said, all of a sudden creatures become sort of moot. There's not a whole lot of sense in playing them, but you can kill the Jite, you can kill the creatures carrying the Jite. Sometimes your deck doesn't care about a Jite, like if you're a combo deck, you might get to ignore it.
Yeah.
But not Dragonstorm, by the way. We're worried about Jite. Can kill our dragons.
Oh,
Yeah.
how many Jite counters do you need to
4! Just 4 to kill a Darker World Render.
All right. I want to actually combine 2 cards here. Another 2-point card we have is Strip Mine.
Yep.
So Strip Mine, land, destroy another land. That's 2 points. Wasteland, a very similar effect, is 0.
Do you feel comfortable talking about this? Because this is kind of your wheelhouse, right?
This is my jam. I don't know if I mean, we'll see how it goes there. So sure, I'll take this one. Strip Mine and Wasteland end games.
Yep.
Like the amount of games that are won off the back of a turn 1 Strip Mine or Wasteland is kind of uncountable. But Strip Mine hits anything, Wasteland doesn't. So I think it's very important that Wasteland is at 0 to keep the format a little bit more fair. I think it's important to sort of punish the people who are playing a lot of non-basics or only non-basics. And as we were talking before, there's a lot of really, really powerful lands in the format. Dark Depths, Thespian Stage. We've got Academy decks. We've got Cradlehoof decks.
Caracas.
We have Caracas, which everybody's playing a lot. And lands like Mazavith, you need to have an answer.
Yep.
Cards like Tech Edge, Tectonic Edge, which is another effect, are a little too slow. Ghost Quarters basically doesn't see play, so Wasteland is sort of the land of choice, and while it could arguably be 1, I think it's healthier for the format for it to be 0.
Yeah, and I think that's what the councils have ultimately decided.
I think the largest point we've ever made when we've talked about it is just the fact that you can't choose to play around Strip Mine. It gets you can't choose to not play lands in the format. As far as I'm aware, there's no
I haven't broken mana stretch
no
yet.
landless decks, like no 1-land Charbelcher decks.
Send us your lists, though.
Yeah, for sure. Liam will jam.
10 out of 10.
Yeah, and so just the fact that like you can choose to make your mana worse by fetching basics to play around Wasteland, it's like not usually correct because they only have 1, but
Yeah.
All right, now let's talk about that magic line between 1-point cards and 0-point cards. And in the 1-line cards, we have True Name Nemesis, Stoneforge, and Mana Drain. Why are these cards 1 points versus 0 versus 2? Like, how do we determine what's a 2-point versus a 1-point card?
Yeah, I might break these up slightly differently. I'm going to talk about True Name and Stoneforge Mystic.
Sure.
And then we'll talk about Mana Drain separately.
Okay, sure. Please.
So True Name is a card that could arguably be more than 1 point. This card, as soon as it hits play, if your opponent is playing creatures, the game is so different. A lot of decks have 0 answers to True Name once it hits play. Some decks have like 2 or 3, but a lot of the time True Name Nemesis just enters play, and now the game is about you've got to find some way through this True Name, or you're going to lose.
We had control and combo decks playing True Name as a wall.
Totally.
Just as the best defender in the game.
Best glacial wall ever printed.
yeah, you just like play it and you're just like holding Damnation and you're just like, yeah, you play more creatures.
Yeah. Stoneforge Mystic, similar idea. Stoneforge has been talked about to go down a bunch. It fits into a bunch of different categories on this list. Like, it's a bit of a tutor. It's also kind of a value engine, but
Gets around counterspells. and
fundamentally,
resolves.
when you play the Stoneforge Mystic, the game now changes to be about can you kill the Stoneforge Mystic before they untap. Because if you don't, at least one equipment's coming into play, and sometimes it gets even more ugly. Sometimes you're playing Legacy and you attack with 2 Goblin Guides and your opponent has a Stoneforge Mystic in play, and then they violin another Stoneforge Mystic and activate the Stoneforge Mystics they have and put batter. It's all bad. It doesn't end well. So yeah, like fundamentally breaks a lot of the rules of Magic. Like it gives you more mana than makes more mana than it should. Tutors, gets around counterspells. Very powerful. Jerry, you want to talk about Mana Drain? Why is Mana Drain a point?
Well, I lost a vote. I don't think it should be a point.
So Mana Drain, if you aren't familiar with it, is a counterspell for blue-blue. So counter target spell, but wait, there's more.
Yeah.
At the beginning of your next main phase, add an amount of colorless mana equal to the CMC of the countered spell.
And so that's last sentence is the reason it was voted to be a point, is that it was deemed that the colorless mana you get predominantly shouldn't be an effect that is stapled to a blue card. It's like they didn't like the blue mid-range decks getting to cast Jace the Mind Sculptor
While leaving
On
other
turn
lands
3.
up.
Sure.
Yeah.
And then also the one other reason to point Mana Drain is that it's a little awkward to let the combo decks free roll this card. Like having your Academy opponent Mana Drain your spell and then kind of go off like that, or having your Storm opponent do a similar thing, was a little frustrating, obviously. So putting a little tax on it was the rationale behind doing that as well.
So I want to talk about an interesting one, which is Blood Moon.
Yeah.
So Blood Moon is a card that is making a lot of people unhappy in Modern. And,
Legacy.
in a lot of formats and stuff like that, this is obviously a very game-whipping card, but in Highlander it's 0 points. Why is that? So this is this blurry line between 0 and 1.
Yeah. So the rationale behind leaving Blood Moon at 0 points is the same for leaving Wasteland at 0 points. The premise is that it keeps unfair decks, or decks trying to be really greedy
them
with
honest.
their... Yeah, it keeps those kinds of decks in check. I think this is a bit untrue, to be honest. Blood Moon beats 2-color decks too a lot of the time.
Yep.
This card's very good and is honestly like one that maybe needs more discussion, especially in recent times with Blue Moon being really, really
I agree.
powerful. But currently it's 0, and the reason it's 0 is because we want red decks, in particular the aggressive red decks, to have an access to interact with the really greedy decks, and this is a way for them to do it outside of things like Price of Progress. So this is just like another check. But it's definitely close. Like, this card's insanely powerful, definitely more powerful than Wasteland, actually, in my mind. And the other reason why it's still 0 is that there is a deck building restriction to it, right? You can't play Blood Moon in every deck. And also, in Highlander, unlike formats like Legacy or Modern, where you can kind of build your deck with a lot of fetch lands and only play maybe 4 or 5 basics, but fetch for them very aggressively, in Highlander, you really do have to be like pretty dedicated to being 1 or 2 colors for Blood Moon to not kind of get yourself with your own Blood Moon. But yeah, I don't know. Blue Moon's too good. Maybe this is the card we could point.
So we've got that very delicate balance between 1 and 0, and I just want to do a quick note to the viewers at home. We might have to cool it with the hashtag fastbond to 0.
Thank God.
Please.
Yeah, we've got the council working really hard on what they do, and they trust it. And as much as I've been trying to brew and stuff like that, I may have accidentally spiraled some type of viral hate campaign against the council regarding fastbond to 0. So I'm going to ask that we just cool it a bit. You can send those tweets to me, but we don't have to necessarily send private messages to other people on the council petitioning them on my behalf.
And let's really quickly talk about why fastbond's 1 point. Just to clarify for people.
Right.
So one of the reasons fastbond is 1 point is it's very unfair in decks that aren't lands, actually, ironically enough. Like, it's good in the lands deck. It's probably worth a point in the lands deck anyway. But where it's really too good is like Academy. It's too good in Storm. I was just thinking about brewing High Tide with Fastbond, because if you get Fastbond into play, all of a sudden all your draw 7s start making like 14 mana when you draw lands.
Yeah, it's the draw 7 decks, right?
Yeah, it's the decks that are going to use this card in a somehow more unfair way than strip mine locking your opponent. I know.
That's the part that blows my mind. It's not even that great or that reliable in strip mine locking people.
Yeah, but that's the thing. It's like, as even fairer decks just get to put it in their opening hand, and if they have a fastbond hand with 3 mana,
I don't know.
just
I'll argue against that one.
fast.
I've played fair fastbond, and it's pretty boring.
yeah.
Like
It can be.
even the most nuts thing you have is like fast bond, 5 lands, 5 drop, and then you have no cards in hand.
Yeah.
You've taken a bunch of damage, and if they have any removal spell, you basically have nothing now.
But you have 5 lands in play, and all your top decks are great. It also just creates this sub game of like if it's 0 and a lot of people are playing it, it creates this like kind of unfun sub game of like who has their fastball in this game, and those are the kinds of effects we sort of try to keep away from being 0.
Yeah, okay.
Like this is a similar idea as to why a lot of the less good fast mana is still at 1 point. Like we don't want Mana Vault to be 0 because we don't want the sub game to exist of like, oh, I drew my Mana Vault this game, so I got him, and then oh, she drew her Mana Vault this game, so she got me.
Yeah,
right.
yeah,
That's
yeah,
the kind of
yeah.
thing we're trying to avoid.
So that's it for our discussion on the points list. Like that, those are all the topics we want to have today. So in general, what we wanted to cover today is how do we determine how much a card is pointed and why? Talk about the different categories of which a card should be pointed. Is it fast? What is it fine? Is it broken? How broken? And then giving examples and discussion about where it fits in and why. You know, why is this card 4 versus 3 versus 2? And hopefully we get a lot of questions about the points list. Hopefully this kind of helped you at home who are getting into the format and trying to figure out, like, this doesn't make any sense. This card's obviously busted. Why isn't it X or why is it Y?
Yeah, hopefully we've peeled back the curtain a little bit on the dark, shadowy console decisions.
Yeah. So let's move to our closing segment, which is Powerful Magic. And up to date, we have Jer. Jer, regale us with your words of magic.
So I was playing a pretty
That was
unfair
good.
deck a few weeks ago. I was playing Doomsday combo.
Oh, baby.
And I
From
started
1 to
out,
0 quite recently.
Yeah. So and I voted against that one, so I had to prove them wrong by playing it and proving that it was too good to be 0. Still undecided. I think it's really good, but I got tired of playing it as I do. But I was playing against an opponent. We had game 1 was really fast. I won that one. Game 2 was long and drawn out, which if you've ever played Doomsday combo is never a good thing.
Okay.
You're not built to grind. So we lost that one eventually. And then in game 3, I draw my opening hand.
Okay.
And I play a fetch land and fetch. And I'm getting Underground Sea and I'm looking at my hand. And I'm like, huh, I think I can win. And then I like stare at it for a little bit longer and then can't figure out the turn 1 win. So I pass, I like play a Lotus Petal, Cabal Ritual, cast Doomsday, and just like get a stack that passes the turn, and then I just win on my turn 2. But it turns out I could have won on turn 1.
Well, here's actually an interesting experiment. Rather than saying how you could have won with turn 1, why don't you say your hand, and we'll see if they can figure it out in the comments.
I posted on the Highlander group, so
Okay.
if you saw that one, the Facebook group, so if you saw it, don't spoil it for anyone else.
Maybe do some enters in your comments so there's a show more. Give people a little
Yeah,
spoiler.
yeah.
Exactly.
We should also tell people how Doomsday works really quick. How that combo works, right? So it's a triple black sorcery that says put your graveyard into your deck and then search for 5 cards and exile the rest.
Yes.
So you're getting 5 cards from your deck to win the game.
What was your hand?
So my hand, the relevant cards in my hand, I had Edge of Autumn, which is 1 and a green. You can search for a land, but the relevant text is you can sacrifice a land to cycle. I had Ideas Unbound in my hand, which is blue, draw 3 cards, discard 3 cards at end of turn. And I think those were the only 2
You had a fetch land.
relevant cards.
You have
in my
another
hand.
land in your
I
hand.
had another land in my hand,
Okay.
and I think that was it.
Seriously, just those 2 cards is all it takes to win?
Yeah.
Yep.
Did you have Doomsday or anything in your hand?
Yeah,
I
you
had
Doomsday.
I had
Okay.
Doomsday.
So the full opening hand is land, Lotus Petal, Cabal Ritual, Edge of Autumn, Doomsday, Ideas Unbound. Those are the 7 cards.
Yeah.
Okay. And
you can win with
guaranteed
that
there's a
hand.
way to win turn 1 with that.
Yeah.
Correct.
So I love that
Deterministic win.
I love that your powerful magic story is I could have turn 1 killed
theoretical
them,
powerful
but I
magic.
killed them on turn 2 instead.
Yeah.
All right, that's awesome. Definitely let us know if you can figure out the line there, because
I'll
We'll link
post
the
the
Doomsday
list.
deck list because you'll need it.
You can.
guaranteed I couldn't do that. So that's our episode for today. We're definitely gonna have some links down below, so feel free to check out the full points list. We're gonna get a Dragonstorm list in there. We're gonna post our. Do we want to do a bit of like the players? I don't know, whatever. We're gonna have Jared's Doomsday list and see if you can figure out down below.
I'll comment and you can post a reply to my.
Ooh, I like that. That's
on
a
my,
good,
my
good
comment.
strategy.
All right. So a reminder that this episode is brought to you with your help at the Patreon at patreon.com/LoadingReadyRun. As always, thank you so much, and we'll see you next time.